Noel, ITIC have just produced a report on tourism in the west of Ireland. Perhaps you could outline how important it is to the economy on the western seaboard.
Tourism is vitally important to the western seaboard. Counties in the western seaboard, particularly counties like Donegal and Kerry, are more dependent on tourism than anywhere else in the country. We estimate it's worth about 2.6 billion in revenue last year. It employs over 100,000 people. And if you look at the proportion of enterprises or businesses that are engaged in tourism and hospitality in the West, it's quite significant. So it is very important to the West.
Very good. And how is it performing at the moment? I know our latest annual data is 2014. How is it performing in terms of visitor numbers, and what are the key source markets?
Well, I think it's performing well this year. As you know, the national scene is very good. And certainly the research we've done looking at it suggests that it's winning back its market share. One of the problems with the West was it had lost market share over the past 4 or 5 years, but it's regaining that, thankfully. And the survey we did in August, September showed that about 3 out of every 4 businesses in the West were happy that their business was up this year. They get more than half of all the revenue that's spent in the country by overseas holidaymakers, and they get about 2/3 of what we spend in domestic tourism.
Very good. And the key source market is probably Central Europe.
Mainland Europe is the largest source market if you measure it in terms of bed nights spent in the west of Ireland. The second most important market then is North America, and those two markets have been growing, very substantially to Ireland, and the West have been the primary beneficiary of that demand. And then you've got the British market, you've got the long haul markets.
Excellent. And from the report we can see that the West's market share has grown from 45% to 48%, which is very encouraging. Of course, growth isn't guaranteed into the future. There are some impediments to future growth. What would you think they are?
Well, there are 2 levels. One is the infrastructure, and I think a recent report from ITIC showed that the infrastructure in the West wasn't fit for purpose for business development. We're talking about roads, we're talking about water quality, and probably most importantly and most urgently in terms of broadband access for doing business. So that's the responsibility of the state, and massive investment is required there to bring it up to scratch. In terms of tourism per se, tourism development, new products, new attractions and so forth, and ITIC is calling on at least 50% of the capital investment by the government over the next 5 years, which equates to about 150 million, should be spent in the west of Ireland, because it gets about half of the demand and has the opportunity to grow.
That's right. And also in the report we're calling for an industry-led forum to encourage cooperation and collaboration between the various tourism entities in the west of Ireland.
Yeah, one of the characteristics when you look at it, when you scratch below the surface, there are about 30 state agencies or quangos of one description or another that have an involvement in tourism. And as Kissinger used to say, if I want to call Europe, who do I call? If you want to talk about tourism in the West, who do you talk to? So there's an urgent need to coordinate that. And now that local government authorities have greater responsibility for tourism, there's a need to make sure that there's an effective coordination of what's going to happen down the road.
And within the report, a number of stakeholders along the western seaboard were interviewed, and there was widespread consensus that the Wild Atlantic Way has been a great success, but there was also a concern that focus and commitment needed to remain on the Wild Atlantic Way, and adequate marketing investment needed to be put behind it.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it's very well received. It's probably too soon to attribute the recent growth just to the Wild Atlantic Way, but as a touring route, it has been very effective. It's now out in the marketplace. It's helped a lot of people to identify with what tourism has to offer along the West. But I think there's a certain fear that, maybe somebody say, well, we've ticked that box now, let's move on to another part of the country. The potential is yet to be realised in terms of the Wild Atlantic Way. And the reporter actually calls that we should develop that into a brand identity for the West. So that in many years' time we're talking about a brand identity for the west of Ireland as like Tuscany or Provence or wherever.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Noel. 100,000 people employed within the tourism sector along the western seaboard. It shows that there's significant potential still to be realised, but only if agencies, government and the industry pull in the same direction. Thank you.
Thank you.